Hello, Rowan here. It is Sunday, which means it is time for another alphabet tag from Jim at Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff. We're on to the 10th tag in the series. We're almost halfway there. Living on a prayer. The J tag. This one is shorter than many of them have been, and I feel like I have less to say about the prompts, so hopefully this will be not a massive nightmare video like my videos have all been lately. Um, let's get into it. J is for Japan. What was the last book you read by a Japanese author? So the last Japanese novel that I read was No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. This is a sort of classic of 20th century Japanese literature. It was written in the 30s, pretty sure. 1937. And it is about a man who is sort of very depressed. He views himself as like out of step with society, not human, no longer human, as the title would suggest. And then follows his sort of miserly, drunken, suicidal, womanizing exploits for a brief period of his life. It is compared to a lot of things that I like, and I do like Japanese literature a lot. However, I was kind of lukewarm on this book. It didn't really do much for me. I found it to be like just okay. There is a manga adaptation of it by Junji Ito, who is a fantastic mangaka artist, who's mainly known for doing horror, and this is not horror at all. I'm very intrigued and interested in reading his take on it, and seeing if maybe I like it more when it's in that frame, because I do like Junji Ito a lot. So but yeah, I do like Japanese literature quite a bit. Your Murakami's, be them Ryu or Haruki, your Mishima's, and then manga, of course. There's so much great manga out there. I'm not very well read in manga. I've read, I've gotten partway through like Berserk and like Attack on Titan, and I've read Junji Ito, but not all of Junji Ito's stuff. Mostly, I've read Uzumaki, and then some of his like more well-known, shorter stuff as well. Prompt 2. J is for Jamaica. What was the last book that you read by an author from the Caribbean or Caribbean? In the world of Jamaican literature, I feel like the titan at this point is Marlon James, who lives here in St. Paul. He wrote A Brief History of Seven Killings, which is a book about Jamaica. It takes place in Jamaica. That centers around the attempted assassination of Bob Marley, which is a real thing that happened. I did start that book a number of years ago. Like when it first came out in paperback, I think is when I picked it up, and so it would have been probably like 2016 or 2015 or something like that. It is a very long book. It's like 700 or 800 pages long, and it's also like written in patois. So it's like, it can be kind of hard to read because people are talking in dialect and stuff. And I didn't finish it, not because it wasn't good, just, it just wasn't, I think, the right time. But I do still have it. And then I also picked up Marlon James's most recent book, Black Leopard, Red Wolf, when that came out, but haven't read it yet. But I've heard mixed things about it, but from people whose like opinion I really trust. Those opinions have been good. So hopefully that is good. The last book I read all the way through by a Caribbean author, I really don't know. It's been a long time. But if you're looking for a good book about Jamaica, Brief History of Seven Killings will not do you wrong. J is for Jane Austen July. What are you reading for Jane Austen July? I think I talked about this in a different video a while ago, but I'm not. I don't like Victorian literature very much. I don't like Jane Austen very much. I have only read Pride and Prejudice by her, but I was not a fan, and none of her other books appeal to me at all. It's just not up my alley. I've talked, more at length in other videos before about how, like, pre-20th century literature, for the most part, doesn't hold very much interest for me. It's not across the board, but just generally speaking, the classics, I'm just not super interested in. And the ones that I've read, I haven't really enjoyed that much. So, Jane Austen July, great. I'm happy that so many people are having a good time reading her works, but I will not be one of them. J is for James Joyce. What is your favorite novel by James Joyce, and have you been brave enough to tackle Finnegan's Wake? Definitely have not been brave enough to tackle Finnegan's Wake. I did own it for a number of years when I had a lot larger library, but when I started downsizing, that one was pretty quick to get the axe, because the chances of me ever actually reading it are obscenely low. And the only thing I've ever read by Joyce is Dubliners, and I read it a long time ago, like when I was in high school. I did somewhat recently pick up a cheap copy that had Dubliners and Portrait of an Artist both in one volume, because I do want to, go back and give Joyce his due. But it's just, he's just one of those people who, like, I've owned his books for forever and just kind of never really read them. 'Cause, like, he's great and important and influenced a lot of people who I have a lot of love for, but I think that maybe he's just, like, maybe more important than enjoyable for me. What's my favorite novel by James Joyce? I haven't even read one. I've just read Dubliners, which is a story collection. So, yeah, I don't know. Someday we'll get to it. It'll happen eventually. Next prompt. J is for joke. Tell us a bookish joke. So, I took it upon myself to try and do some research for this prompt and look up jokes about books on Google. I spent like 15 minutes going through Google and reading jokes about books, and they were all really unfunny. Sorry. I do think that, like, jokes, like the concept of, like, a joke, like a one-liner joke, it's tough. I think that most of them aren't funny, personally. There are definitely some comedians who have disproven me. Stephen Wright, Mitch Hedberg, St. Paul native Mitch Hedberg, and Neil Hamburger, of course. If you don't know who Neil Hamburger is, he was one of the, like, great pioneers of anti-comedy. He's a character played by a man named Greg Turkington, who sort of came up in the like sort of punk rock, noise rock world, and then started doing this anti-comedy performance art, basically, as Neil Hamburger in the early 90s. And he was a huge influence on people like Tim and Eric. And at this point, I think that Greg Turkington is probably more famous for On Cinema at the Cinema, which is a thing that him and Tim Heidecker from Tim and Eric created together about 10 years ago. That is this massive network of different interconnected pieces of media that began with this web show, movie review show, that in which Greg and Tim play fictionalized versions of themselves. But it has spun off into, there's been an Adult Swim TV show, there's multiple musical projects. There was a like 6-hour long thing called The Trial of Tim Heidecker that was sort of like a C-SPAN court TV parody. There was a fake documentary called Mr. America about Tim Heidecker running for, I think it was like district attorney in Los Angeles. And so Greg is probably better known for that now, but he, got to start as Neil Hamburger. And he was as Neil Hamburger, he was in like the Tenacious D movie. Those guys are big fans of his. And then Tenacious D took him on tour and had him open for them when they were touring for The Pick of Destiny. So they're playing these like huge amphitheaters, tens of thousands of people. And they had Neil Hamburger open for them. And so Neil Hamburger, his shtick has kind of changed over the years. His early stuff was more just like straight up just like bad jokes that are not funny. But then in the 2000s-ish, he sort of changed and started doing stuff that was more like offensive or just like meant to upset people. And so like at these Tenacious D shows, it's all these like white bros, and so all of the jokes he were doing were like making fun of like bands that white dudes like. So it was like talking about how terrible like Pink Floyd is, or like how everyone in Red Hot Chili Peppers are just like heroin addicts, and like John Lennon is burning in hell, and like all these things that are just meant to rile people up and get them upset and like have them boo him and like just want to kill him. It's great. There's a record he released called Hot February Night that chronicles one of those shows, and it's one of the best stand-up comedy albums ever made, I think. But so, bookish joke, I couldn't find a good one. But I'll tell you a Neil Hamburger joke. It's a little R-rated, though, so if there's any children, cover your ears. Why does E.T. the Extraterrestrial love Reese's Pieces? Because they have the same flavor that cum does on his home planet. You're welcome. Okay, and our final prompt. J is for Jaguar. Enzo Ferrari described the Jaguar E-Type XKE as the most beautiful car in the world. What do you consider the most beautiful car in the world? I don't know if it's like the most beautiful car in the world, but my favorite car, not that I know a great deal about cars, I'm not like anywhere near an expert. I don't know a ton about them. I do appreciate them, but not an expert at all. But my fave is probably the 1967 Shelby Mustang GT500. If you know that car, you probably know why I like that car. Not hard to guess. In the year 2000, a little movie starring Nick Cage came out called Gone in 60 Seconds, wherein he and a group of people are under duress forced to steal a number of cars, and the final rarest climactic car that he has to steal is the 1967 Shelby Mustang GT500. And the movie ends with a very long car chase sequence with Nick Cage driving that car. And when that movie came out when I was 10, so I was like the perfect age for that movie. And it's not a great movie. It's not bad. It's fine. But as soon as I saw that movie, I was like, that car fucking rocks. That is an awesome car. And so, like, you know, I'm not like a loyalist to that specific 67 GT500. That whole era of like late 60s, early 70s Mustangs is like, that's my jam. Those are my favorite cars. I'm much more of a muscle car guy than a sports car guy. You know, you know, around that same time, you know, when I was a little kid, my best friend's dad was like super into Corvettes. And Corvettes are cool, but Mustangs are cooler. Sorry. And there's like a classic car show that they do every year here at the fairgrounds in St. Paul that's like a pretty big deal. So I've gotten to see some of these 60s Mustangs and like sit in them and stuff. And that's pretty cool. So that's what I'm going with. And that's it. Holy shit, this video is going to not even be 20 minutes long. Thank God. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks always to Jim for making these tags, putting in the work, and being such a positive beacon for the BookTube community. Yeah. Thanks so much.